us. Give it a few moments. Oh, I usually open with an icebreaker. Does anyone have an icebreaker that we can?
Man,
I usually have to Google these things to try to find.
Yeah. I think that's what I did. That's what I did in youth ministry. It's like, oh, we've got youth ministry tonight. I need to Google something. What are we gonna do?
Last time I did this, like one of the icebreaker questions was like really deep. I think it was, or not deep, but it was intense. It was like, what is one thing you want to accomplish before you die?
Okay, I got a good question like that.
Okay.
Maybe not as deep, but if your house catches on fire, what's like the 3 things you grab? And you can assume that pets and all family members, they get out too. So you don't have to grab them.
So we're talking material items.
Three material items you have to grab. Your go-to. Aaron's like, the 3 pictures behind me. Those are coming.
I've converted so much digitally now that I'm like, I don't know.
Let it burn.
Normally it'd be like, oh, I'd have to grab my computer, and now I'm like, I'd be all right. I guess a phone.
Yeah, phone is the first thing that comes to mind.
Underwear.
Yeah, it depends on how dressed
Phone and
I am
undies.
at the moment.
That's all I need. Yeah. phone and clean undies. That's all I need.
2 pair of underwear and a phone.
Yeah. Phone, iPad, and a sweatshirt, probably. And then I could live the rest of my life.
Sweatshirt's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. That's smart.
It'll be cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys have the like the go bag, the apocalyptic go bag ready?
I mean, I have my backpack that has all my essentials. So maybe I would just cheat and just have my backpack ready to go. Because that always has, like, iPad, wallet, keys. Everything is always in there. So you just grab the backpack and go.
Yeah, my wife always says, all I need to do is grab the diaper bag. There's everything you need to survive. It's in
That's
the
true.
bag. She's like, that's definitely
fair.
what I'm saying.
So good.
The one sentimental thing I would try and grab is I've been journaling since I was in middle school. So I've got just 2 shelves of journals. So those have like more value to me than like pretty much every other material thing I have, just because it's like handwritten story by like 13-year-old Sam or 20-year-old Sam. You know, it's wild to go back and see how awful.
But you can only grab 3. Which 3 journals would you grab?
Yeah, well, I could just summarize it: a shelf of journals.
That's cheating.
That's cheating. Everything I can fit into this shelf. No, I've literally thought about it before. Like, I've got a bag, and I just like just sweep them all into it and go, and then we all die because it's not. Well, maybe you could light fires with it or something. I don't know.
Well, cool. So everyone, thank you for joining with us today, being with us live. If you're watching this after the fact and pre-recorded, we welcome you as well. Today we have Sam Wake from Movement Portland, obviously in Portland, Oregon. He is a fellow church planter down there doing his thing. So Sam, you want to just give like a quick brief thing of what you've been up to for the last X amount of years since Portland kind of was in the picture?
Yeah. So we've lived in the city for 3 years now, working on year 4. Moved out to plant a church. I'm from the Midwest originally, which I believe you both are as well. Correct? Both from Illinois?
Yep. Wisconsin. I won't claim Illinois. Wisconsin. I moved from Illinois, but I'm from Wisconsin.
Got it. I lived in Illinois for a little bit.
Very distinct clarification for those like that are from the Midwest. Understand like that's a thing.
Yeah, I had to live in Illinois for a time, but I claim Wisconsin.
Exactly.
Yeah. I lived in Illinois for a short stint too, but I guess I claim Indiana. But they look exactly the same. There's really no difference there.
That's not true. Somebody who grew up in Illinois, like we don't see Indiana the same way.
Yeah, it's probably
Gross over there.
probably so. Yeah. See, I'm just so far away from all those like like for me, I'm from Southern Indiana, so it was like I lived right on the Ohio River, which was Kentucky, and like we were right next to Kentucky, and there was always some weird rivalry there. A lot of Kentuckian jokes, but anyways, yeah, from the Midwest, like you guys originally, born and raised there. My wife's from Phoenix, but we just got to that moment in life where we felt the Lord leading us to start a church, and for us, we wanted to do that in a city, and kind of far away from where we had been doing ministry, just to get out of the context we were in, get in a whole new space, new relationships, a place where we didn't know anybody, and particularly in cities because they just sit at the top of culture. So the town I grew up in Indiana was like chewing on the culture Seattle chewed on 10 years prior. So the city just flows downstream to the rest of the world, it seems. And so I wanted to, just as a young pastor, someone who's following after Jesus, I wanted to go into the middle where culture is like, where culture is headed and where culture is, is like taking place and being curated and created. I wanted to go there and see Jesus on the move in that space. So kind of joining on what he was doing in that space. So Portland became the place we landed. We didn't have it wasn't like Portland was it from the beginning. We just visited different cities and landed here, visited, loved it. Just felt like it was the right fit. We love the city still today, 3 years later. We call it home. We plan to be here as long as we possibly can. So yeah, moved across the country, planted our feet here, lived here for a year as citizens, and for the last just over 2 years, we've been leading our church plant movement, and it's taken on many different shapes and sizes over the years. Because we're in the journey, and we're learning as we go. So you never know when a pandemic's going to strike, and even that changes the rhythm of everything. So, yeah, that's a little bit about us. We got 2 little girls. They're 1 and 4. What else do you want to know? My social security number.
I mean, that'd be helpful. I mean, it's about to disappear because the payroll tax cut just went into effect, so that's not going to do you much good. But and there we go. All right. One of the things you said there that I think actually could lead well into kind of like where we want to go with this conversation. I think it's in the description of this video, but you kind of said that like Portland's culture is kind of like Seattle's culture from 10 years ago, kind of worked its way in, and I think that's the same way from like the coast tend to work their way into the Midwest, right? And usually that's just the nature of cities. That's just how they kind of operate and function for millennia. But I think what's interesting in today's kind of environment is specifically around the protests that have been happening since the beginning of June, kind of end of May. Like that's kind of a thing that started in a lot of major cities and kind of worked their way into like, I know small 15,000 and lower towns that were having protests. Specifically in the beginning, maybe not continuing like it is in Seattle or maybe Portland. But kind of how did you see, or what was it like in Portland kind of during those early days of the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, kind of that those marches?
Ask that last part again there. The question.
What was Portland like kind of in those early days of protests, or when did they kind of become a thing that was you could no longer ignore?
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel like they became a thing right away. Also, we had been in quarantine for COVID for a season, so it was odd, just walking out even on our front sidewalk at the beginning of quarantine and just not hearing cars driving on the road, like just desolate inner city was wild. So then when you get to protest, and then protest at like the scale, the size, I mean, Portland and protests are like synonymous. It's just always happening in the city. The city is very welcoming and open to it, which is really incredible. The amount of different kinds of protests that happen all year long. It is a Portland rhythm. So where maybe like the town my parents live in, I don't think they've ever had a protest. And so for even the word protest like hit national news, that's an everyday thing in Portland. So you don't really think twice about it. the scale of the protest post George Floyd's murder was. I just got chills even thinking about it just now. It was incredible, and how fast it grew. Within the first week, and I participated in some of them. Within the first week, I went to one of them that you may have seen a picture of, like 10,000 people on the Burnside Bridge, all laying down. It's like someone decided to fly a drone in the moment. Genius. But everyone like lays down on their stomach, put their hand behind their back, and chant "I can't breathe." I was actually on my motorcycle at the end of the bridge, and I was just taking in the whole scene. And man, powerful. Just that many people come together, and to know what this event is because of another event that didn't even happen here in this city, but it's felt, and to see this many people just moved by it to get out here and do this, it was absolutely profound. I mean, my brother actually bought the photo. The photographer sold it so that the proceeds could go to the movement. But it's powerful. It's just, I've never seen anything like that in my life. It was amazing. And then like another experience that I had that was unique. One of the times I wasn't intentionally going, but we were tucking Journey in, my oldest, she's 4. We were tucking her into bed, and we heard all this ruckus outside on the street. So we walked out, and the whole protest came right by our street. And so it was wild. Like, our 2 little girls are in their pajamas. And we walked out. My mom from Rockville, Indiana, was in town. And so she even, was taking it in. It was just a wild experience for her. But the waves of different ways of how people were expressing and grieving the loss of George Floyd and celebrating his life. So you'd have waves of like people cheering and chanting, and it was like joyous, and then just a wave of mourners. And they're just like, it brings you to tears just to feel, and you start hearing them chant Breonna Taylor and start chanting these other names. Whoo, man, like, it's powerful. I mean, it's one thing to watch it on the news and let the news determine the narrative for you. It's a whole nother thing to stand on the ground with flesh and blood people and to see humanity unite itself around the value of humanity. That's what, maybe in a simple way you hear it. That's what's being chanted about and marched about. Powerful. So, yeah. Initially, I mean, I think it just it took Portland by storm really quick, which also really interesting living here because, we've also had violent protests in our city before, between different polarizing groups. And so when that happens, it doesn't necessarily catch you off guard either. You kind of expect these groups to go at it. One of them says, "Hey, we're going down to Pioneer Square tonight." The other group's like, "We'll see you there." We're used to seeing, the police in their, riot gear to try and keep people safe. But yeah, definitely a lot of people cooped up inside. Then this murder takes place, and now we have a real good reason to go outside. There's some of that, that way too a little bit.
Well, and on top of like not only quarantine, but there were also like Ahmaud Arbery and Christian Cooper and like things within like a month and a half maybe also happened. So there was just like that hit the boiling point, and that's kind of when everyone snapped.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I've learned. Well, I'll let you keep asking questions. Yeah, that's my answer to question 1.
So yeah, like we had a very similar experience with I always think of the silent march that happened here in Seattle, where like that's to me like the image of what people are pushing for, where like 70,000 people decide to join and march like completely silently. Like there was no talking, like it was pouring, it was Seattle pouring rain, it was raining.
It was just heavier than a mist.
It was a little heavier than normal, but yes, it was.
We got a sprinkle. It must be pouring.
It wasn't like Illinois pouring like I saw the other day. I was like, oh, I don't miss that. Do not miss that. But anyways, we were like on this march with like 70,000 people and just like complete silence and like honoring that, like just the number of people that are represented in like honoring the silence, not only just because of the like I can't breathe like 8 minutes and 46 second silence, but also like these protests are keeping in mind like public safety, and by wearing masks and like doing your best to like not spit on people and like further spread the virus and all that. Just the honor and respect that is kind of seen in these protests is really, really profound, and really good. What I kind of want to dig into a little bit more of that, the story of them walking past your house. What was kind of the conversations that you had with your kids due to, because I mean, you said Journey, like what got up, right? And was kind of like, did you witness it? Like, what was the conversation with her and like how to,
well, we're right on ground level, and then her window is right on the street. So it was loud, you know, there's like a truck going by with, you know, it's like just bumping music and then a wave, you know, but so she was like, what is this? And, you know, it sounds like a parade or something. And so we went out, and that was what she just kept asking, like, Daddy, why are they doing this? Daddy, what's going on? Daddy, why are they saying those names? Or, you know, and, you know, some of it was catchy. Like she could even catch on to it. It was like almost like a nursery rhyme or something, like the cadence of it all. But yeah, we've also raised our kids just being really honest with them about what's going on, and, you know, letting a 4-year-old the best they can, you know, process it. They can't wrap their head around everything, but we actually have used this whole season to talk about like racism from the angle of bullying, because it seems to be the thing that connects with her, like someone taking advantage of someone else, like someone with power and authority using it to hurt someone that's innocent, or you know, just doing the best we can to help her understand it. So that's kind of how she has translated that moment, is that that racism through the lens of like bullying. But she was asking questions, and we're talking about it as they're all walking through, and that was the kind of concept. And she already knew what had happened because we had talked to her. So actually, what was really profound is I remember her asking, "Dad, is this because of George? Is this because of George?" Yeah, it's just like, oh man, like something, that 4-year-old question just like tears at your heart. Because she can wrap her head around it, and the innocence of a 4-year-old little girl in contrast to the murder and the abuse of power, you know, and to see all these people marching for the sake of humanity. Yeah, it was powerful. It was also really interesting having my mom there, probably a little bit more interesting too, just because her taking it in. You know, coming to Portland can be culturally disorienting alone on a nice Portland day for some, you know. but like seeing that, it kind of forced it to not be in the media, I think, for her. And it definitely makes you feel uncomfortable. And I think that's what protests are supposed to do, make you feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that existed. It was also interesting to watch how different waves of people tried to engage with you as you were on the sideline. Several people tried to pull you into it. We had one guy that just kept saying, join us, don't just watch, join us. And I was like, I'm tucking my kid into bed, you know. So yeah, just the passion to get as many people in Portland to be a part of it's kind of how it felt. But yeah, wild, absolutely wild. So.
What have you seen in terms of how it has been portrayed in the media?
I hate it.
And what you've experienced. Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so, man, I was talking to a friend of mine, and someone who I would consider as a mentor, fellow pastor in the city, and I was like, dude, like the city right now, this was early on, COVID, protests, riots, police brutality in our city here in Portland even. I was like, dude, how are you processing this cultural moment? And I loved his response. He just said, man, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. There is just so much going on. And I really appreciated his response to me, because someone I looked up to, and for him to say, I'm processing it, there is so much going on, kind of gave me permission to process. and not be the
Mhm.
person full of answers, which I don't think that's even the healthiest place for us to land as pastors. But at times you feel like you at least personally want to sort it out and be able to place this in the puzzle of the disequilibrium you're experiencing. But yeah, I think there's a party that wants to echo his words. There's just so much going on right now. The layers to our cultural moment is so insane. Like COVID alone didn't wait for us to cure cancer. It didn't wait for us to get out of bankruptcy. It didn't wait for people to get past their depression. It just came, and you're dealing with it. You know, it's a new thing added to the pressures of your life. That alone is enough for anyone to call it a rough year. You know, and then you just compile all these other things on it. On top of it, you know, we're in the middle of an election year. The polarized culture we're living in, the loudness of the left, the loudness of the right, the war, the social war that's raging between these two groups of people, and seeing it in the media in one way, and then experiencing it personally within your own family or your in-laws or fill in the blank. It's just such a convoluted, messy moment. We have so many things to. I think we're just very aware, if anything, of how broken our systems are, and how, at least for me, I think one of the good things that's hopefully coming from this is we can see how the system doesn't benefit everyone. That there is that we have blind spots. That there are things that benefit some and not others, and I think it's just such a convoluted moment. When it comes to the media, I'm angry personally at media all the time. My least favorite place to be isn't just CNN or Fox News or a specific news station. It's actually Facebook. At least CNN, I know what I'm going to get. And Fox, like, I know where it's coming from. But you get on Facebook and you see the battle of it all. But yeah, personally, when it comes to answering your question, like Portland, I do not like how media is portraying Portland because it's not portraying Portland accurately. It's just not. It's giving you maybe a snippet of something in the middle of this complex cultural moment, but it's not giving you something that encourages us to be thoughtful, to be thinkers, to be just wise about being good neighbors or citizens of this nation and our specific cities. I can't stand how it's portrayed, mainly because I live in a neighborhood where all the violence you see going on. I walk my dog and my 4 and 1-year-old daughter down the same streets every day. The violence in Portland that you've seen, the battle between feds and protesters and what's going on there. And personally, also learning the right language to describe so much of this. But what you see on the news, man, it's happening on 2 blocks, on one side of 2 blocks. And you get a 300 millimeter camera lens zoomed in on it by a reporter that's standing a distance away. It looks like it's happening everywhere. And then you have a president tweet, no wonder, Portland's going to hell, underneath another tweet he probably made or something. It's a picture of the city that is just so inaccurate to my personal experience. And not only that, having conversations with police officers and also having conversations with protesters. These are all real people, humans working through this moment themselves. Media can't grab it. The media is not doing a good job telling the actual story. I don't think it's doing a good job telling a story. But it also really frustrates me because I think we're learning how powerful media is, how powerful it is to make us think and feel certain things and believe things. So where it's also good because we can get stuff out, we can post videos of terrible things happening so the world can respond to the murder of George Floyd. That's great that we have that video. But yeah, I think there's very little to help our generation sort through it all, which, you guys mentioned you were working through the circle, which I'd love to talk more about that actually, how you guys are processing as a church community. But yeah, Facebook just landed, and there was a time when you would just be like, hey, I'm at McDonald's. And whoa, all my friends know. You couldn't post a picture or anything, but none of us were trained for the next 10 years what was going to come out of something like Facebook or MySpace at the time, So
well, and the very nature of Facebook is, or any social media platform, but specifically Facebook, is to create endorphin so that you receive that like high and adrenaline rush when you like post something and get those like that feedback that happens. And so the company actually benefit from that kind of culture because you constantly come back looking for more, like for better or for worse, like you're going to constantly come back for it. And so, yeah, we were not trained on how to handle that.
No, it's just like we just dove in. We've been swimming in it forever, and it's wild. It's a really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish I could just go far, far away and just like, I mean, maybe this is what actually happened. Like the aliens that made us and built the pyramids. Those people, like, they're like, look, what's happening. They've developed social media. Like, this is when it's really fun to study them.
You just turned yourself
We've
into
waited.
a stereotype right there.
Oh well. Yeah, man. Wow, yeah, media I just don't think it's capturing it well, and I think it's good for us to. I think I would jump in and say this too. I'm really encouraged by the conversations I'm having with people from both camps of political persuasion. I'm really impressed with people's ability to say, yeah, the media is not hitting it right. Even people from like my hometown that would lean right. My own dad, when he was out here getting his perspective, he's a Republican. He's voted towards the right, his whole life. But when he came to Portland, like him contextualizing it, he there was this moment where we were talking and he said, Sam, I think I understand the other side a little bit more. And not that he's going to change his vote necessarily, but his ability to empathize, I mean, I just felt like it was huge. And the biggest thing was I took him down to where the protests are happening during the day. And, the police officers are down there and protesters are down there and there's no violence. People are just down there, getting ready for the protests that evening and whatnot. And he's down there with me, seeing that when you see the humanity of it, it's no longer a newscast with music behind it, King, violence in Portland, It helps us to just go, I don't know if media is telling the whole story. And I've been impressed with the amount of people who've said that, and I'm grateful for that. But we've also had so much crazy media this year. I think maybe a lot of people are fed up to some degree. So
yeah, I think what I think about is like the passage. I'm going to draw a blank on where it's actually from, but the do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Like we focus, especially from like Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, like activist city, protesters, like it's in our blood, it's in our rhythm. Like we focus really heavily on the do justice and love mercy, but I think we often forget about like the walk humbly bit. That like in all of this, we need to be walking humbly and listening and like bringing along and all those kinds of things. That like, I know I've caught myself like wanting to react strongly when someone is on the opposite side, but it's that third bit is like really key to actually making progress happen and actually having the dialogue and the conversation. Otherwise it'll just shut down if no one is. And I think that's what, if Talissa and I, so my wife, if we've been able to like name what frustrates us the most about specifically Trump, but often those with like power, is the lack of humility that comes across, like the arrogance and just the I know exactly how it's going. Like that is what rubs us wrong if we actually really, it's not so much the policies, even though yes, not so much like just being the person that he is or the administration that it is. It's like the lack of humility that just like strikes us. And so I think as people doing this work of like protesting and trying to work through like internal and external racism, it's that humbly bit, not only humility for others, but also humility for ourselves, right? Like, especially as white males or white men on the screen, like we have never had to think about our skin color, our gender, or anything in like the way that we go about life. And so now that we're kind of deconstructing a lot of these things, it's important to have grace on ourselves as well as we kind of go through it, because we're going to mess up, we're going to say something wrong, or we're going to whatever. But the key is to then recognize that and then say, okay, I messed up here, or I did this wrong. So now like, let me change course. Let me actually shift and if you want to get even more spirit, like, let me repent of this and change and turn. And that third key of walk humbly is just crucial in these days. Otherwise, everyone's going to get into their sides, and it's game over. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the way we've been talking about it at Movement and processing it is just through the word civility, the loss of civility that exists. And man, I think, the walk humbly piece. So it's definitely missing in a let's dominate the other party agenda. So, which isn't good, but it's good.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier of like wanting to hear more about the circle and kind of like what that is and like how we use it and kind of how we've been trying to use it or been using it. Basically, it's this tool to help with processing of events, right? They're called the book that kind of coins a lot of these terms. They're called Kairos moments. So they're basically these moments that impact you, large or small, but in some way they kind of catch you off guard. So it can be, I think, Sam, you were actually the one that I remember. You probably didn't coin it, but you're the one that said it, of the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the mental, and the financial. That has stuck with us in our house, actually, from whatever, it was like 8 months ago. But anyways, like in one of those 5 categories, you may be in some way. Like it could be the loss of a job. It could be, a breakup. It could be anything. It could be large or small. And so then you then enter into the circle, right? So then you've got these 6 different steps in this circle. So you have 2 sides. The first side is asking the question, what is God saying to you? Is kind of the overarching question. And then the second half is, what are you going to do about that? So what is God saying to you? What are you going to do about that? And then on the first half of the circle of asking, you're going through observation. So you're asking what happened. And then you're reflecting, you're saying, why did that happen? And then you discuss. And so it's a circle. It's designed to be done in community, designed to be kind of in this conversational space. And so you kind of spend a lot of time on that first half, kind of asking like, what happened and why did it happen? And it's also more like, what happened and why did you react that way? Or why are you feeling that way? And kind of discussing that in community. And as you kind of go through that, you may get to the place of asking, okay, what are you going to do about that? So what is your plan? What is your like smart goal that you're going to make that you can then take the next steps to kind of resolve this half of the circle? Like, what are you going to do? And then you actually act on it. And those people then hold you accountable to that plan. And then that whole cycle can take anywhere from weeks to months to years. So like a couple that I've been going through for the last 5 years is like asking the question, like, what is the church? What is missions? Like, what is ecclesiology? All those kinds of things, and kind of processing that, taking a plan and acting on it, and then kind of going back, what is God saying, so on and so forth. And initially, so for our community, one thing we did, or one way we used it, was during COVID. In the very beginning, we experienced something where, in just general, going into quarantine one weekend, and we had that Sunday like a moment for us all to come together, kind of process through that. And then we did it again during I think it was the weekend following, or the Sunday following the George Floyd protest that happened on like a Friday or Saturday. I can't remember the exact details, but we did that, and we just held space for people to feel the emotion of the moment. And I think for us, that's like, our motto is you'll never walk alone. And like, we believe in spaces to hold big feelings, but the key is to not just feel those feelings, although that's important. And some of us need to learn how to feel those feelings. It's also learning how to process those emotions. So it's either recognizing them or processing them. And so it may take a while to kind of get to the root of why you reacted that way. So like, one that you may experience, like the anger at the portrayal of Portland, like asking, okay, that's the what, right? So then now we kind of go into like the why. Like, why is it anger and not sadness? Why is it anger and not, I don't know, some other type of emotion? I mean, you kind of like would walk through that, and then that's asking like, what is God saying to you in that moment? And you kind of dig a little deeper beyond like the surface of I'm just angry. which is what we experienced a lot with George Floyd in our community, is just like pure anger right up the bat. It's like, okay, that's good. I'm glad we're angry. You should be angry, but let's dig into, okay, why are you angry? Like, what's the deeper root cause of that, so that we can actually do some internal work and make some progress in that moment. So that's kind of what the circle is, and like kind of how it would look like in both community and internal work as well.
Yeah, I love it. It's helpful even to me, because there's so much of what you said I have been personally doing, or like my community group is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that there's a lot out there in the media that's like, hey guys, this is how you can process all the stuff we're putting out here, or different moments. It's solid. I love that. I'm just gonna steal it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Please.
We stole it, so
yeah, perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing that you guys are working through a sort of plan. It's a very different message coming in to our, sphere than what a lot of other is coming in right now. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah, and
so let's
got the 5 things right. It's physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual. Well, let's just make 6. Throw financial in there. That's good.
Hey, financial's got to be one, man. Like, I've been going through financial Kairos moments for 3 years now, so like, surely that's a category.
Yeah. No, absolutely is a category. Me too. Everyone is. We're just gonna add it.
Yeah, we all are. But
we're adding it this year. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even like just in light of like COVID too, like the loss of jobs, like, right? That's a financial thing that is affecting people, and that affects you, and like you kind of work through that.
Or process. Churches, it's the pressure on all of it, or the person that took unemployment, and they're like, whoa, I'm doing way better now with this unemployment check. Right?
Yeah.
And then
yeah. Financially across the spectrum, dude, it's a huge pressure point this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
What else?
So I want to shift gears a little bit, and into. I know I'd seen a post from you 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And the cycle is kind of starting again. I haven't seen as many posts about it. I think I saw Russell was one that posted about it recently. But this Sean character that has decided to take it upon himself to teach the world what worship is. And so...
What do you think about it?
How have you...
Yes.
I have opinions, but
I've been told that you learn more about people through the questions they ask. So. The things they say.
That's probably fair.
And I believe you lead worship. So.
Yeah, it's definitely in that question. Like, this has been a passion of mine for almost a decade at this point.
Absolutely.
And so it's definitely on there. And I think this goes into, like, that I asked that question was there's obviously something there, but it's also similar to, like, Aaron, you and I had this conversation 2 weeks ago of, like, me processing a Kairos moment about how, like, the Jesus I have known to love is being co-opted by something that is so radically different than what I've devoted my life to. And so I think this Sean and like the whole Let Us Worship banner is a very similar thing, like a thing that I'm passionate about and like went to school for and like wanted to go to once. I only went to LCU for like one specific class. Probably should have just audited it. Now that I think about it, would have saved me $80,000. But there was one class that I really wanted to take, and that was one, like biblical theology of worship. And just learning that it's so much bigger than what our evangelical understanding of worship is, being like music. And so that's kind of the whole backstory of the passion for me behind this whole Sean thing.
Yeah.
What does it look like? I mean, obviously it's probably a similar situation of being overblown in the media, because I know, Aaron, you and I were talking this morning about how he was in Portland or in Seattle on
Again.
Monday, so
Yesterday.
last night for the second time.
Yeah.
And he only gathered maybe a couple hundred
hundred is
people
what
from
it
what you were
looked
saying, Aaron.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Yeah. So
What's the
So not nearly as much
for
as the first
revival?
time.
I'm curious. I'm off on that. Where do we get to call it revival? Is it like
revival
I
was
think it
just
should be a percentage of
mid-size.
population,
yeah?
and at that point, it's like 0.001, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Pretty small.
Yeah.
And that's to say if any of them were actually from Seattle and not from like the outer lying area.
That was the experience of the last one. Is that most
Um,
people had come in from outside of the city.
Yeah, same here.
Mm-hmm.
Has he only been there once now? To Portland?
I know he came once, and I know that the second one was planned, and I think it might have happened. But honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on it. I saw Russell's most recent post as well. I know he was going to protest it. So I don't know if that's like, I'm assuming it happened over this past weekend. I'm not sure though. I'm not aware. I'm a pastor in the area that's completely unaware unless it comes in on my. So if it happened, didn't pick up on it this time. But yeah, what was the specific question there you asked at the beginning? Just how?
Yeah. So like, what are your thoughts, or maybe even more like, in what ways are you processing through? And this is related both to Sean as well as to just COVID church. Like, how are you processing like definitions of like what is church, what is worship, what is community, like these things that we have to redefine now. There are some movements like the Sean, like Let Us Worship movement that wants to hold on to this is what this means instead of trying to think imaginatively. So kind of what has been your process, or like where are you at with like redefining some of these terms?
Yeah,
like worship, gathering, church.
Yeah, almost every sentence you hit or you said, it welled up something in me that I feel like you could probably talk about for hours. It's all on there, so like I'll try and kind of weave it all together. Yep. I think this also ties in just into the media. I think the danger of media giving people far away a skewed perspective causes for decontextualized opinions and solutions. And I think that's when it comes specifically to Sean, you know, I have my opinions on it. And there's probably Christians in the city of Portland that would disagree with me. They voiced their opinion to me on social media. Normally, it hasn't been a lot of those people. Actually, no one has voiced an opinion of disagreeing with me who lives in this specific neighborhood. Yeah, I think the decontextualized response to world problems is one of the most dangerous things any of us can be involved with. And for me, I would, as a pastor where I sit, I resonate with what you're saying. Not even as a pastor, just as a Jesus follower, I resonate with what you're saying, Trevor, and so many others from my generation who feel like the Jesus that they have been following is being skewed by media, is being portrayed as a violent person who came to establish a kingdom of dominance and white people. And it just it doesn't feel like the Christian church in this moment, in media or nationally, maybe down at the neighborhood level it can, but in what's broadcast in our pocket all day long and on our TVs and our computer screens, it doesn't seem like the church has any ability to think wisely or contextually about the moment. It seems like we are scared. We are scared, and therefore we respond by putting a decontextualized answer or giving a decontextualized solution to a problem from a distance because we don't understand it or it makes us uncomfortable. It's wild to me that the statement Black Lives Matter, that alone, that statement rubs people wrong. It rubs Christians wrong. It's just a statement. It's like, yes, they do, don't they? Don't Black Lives Matter? We get White Lives Matter. And I've heard so many people come out with good stuff. I'm not reinventing anything here, but saying all lives matter during a Black Lives Matter protest is like showing up to breast cancer awareness march and saying, hey guys, what about colon cancer? Well, yes, colon cancer is, we're raising funds right now for the fight against breast cancer. And so
Mhm.
like, just watching the church's inability and how crippled the church is at handling this year, 2020, it's comical. It's saddening. It also, I think, reveals a lot of opportunity for the church to shift, change, and grow. I don't think that
Mhm.
Sean is leading a revival. This is live, so I guess that's public to the rest of the world. A lot of people, my grandparents probably disagree with me on that, but
We'll back you up. We'll back you up.
yeah, okay. I just don't. I live right here where it's happening, and you go across right there on the riverfront where they're doing it. The homeless are still sleeping there. And
Mhm.
the tension and the polarization in our city still exists. It wasn't solved
Mhm.
by some outside celebrity pastor coming in declaring it solved by pushing his political agenda. Because I am a walking politicking person. Like we all have thoughts, but pushing it upon the city in the way you did it, it's decontextualized. It was against city ordinances in place. Social distancing
Mhm.
wasn't practiced. It wasn't encouraged. People weren't wearing masks, all for the sake of Christ. I just think that's baloney. When I
Mhm.
come to Jesus, I see someone that deeply cares about sick people, weak people, people who are marginalized, and I don't sense that is for them. It
Mhm.
sounds more like we're going to make some money off of a worship album that we recorded down by the water. And some of my Christian friends would hear me say that and be like, "You're just so pessimistic. Like, we just need to be worshiping right now." And I'm like, I worship every freaking day. When I make coffee, I try and perfect it. I every day when I'm changing diapers, man, it's an act of worship. Learning to just breathe intentionally is an act of worship. So this
Mhm.
next step idea that we need music, and which I love music. I love that it's another form of worship, but it's not the form of worship. I don't think it ever
Mhm.
should have been. But then you take COVID. Oh, we can't gather anymore. We can't worship. It just reveals how skewed our perspective of connecting with God is. I think one of my
Mhm.
saving graces this year, and even as a pastor, as a dad, as just as an individual who has to make sense of this messy year, is that I really grabbed on to a passage in the Bible where the Pharisees are asking Jesus, "Where's the kingdom?" And he says, "It's in your midst." And that's what that's captivated me for so long, is that the Spirit of God is in our midst everywhere we are. It's at work. It's a mystery. We're engaging with it in the mundane. And I am more captivated
Mhm.
by the God that loves mundane moments, mundane people, the messy things we avoid and we don't want to associate with. That Jesus captivates me. And I don't think that's the
Mm.
Jesus that we're talking about at these kind of events that are completely decontextualized and they don't have relational bandwidth in the space where specifically Sean came to lead. I'm not sure. Say what?
There's not a humility there. Like
Absolutely.
going back to what we talked
Totally.
about earlier, right? Like there's no humility
Mhm.
in that space. It's I will come in and I will.
Yep.
I will fix
Mhm.
it. I will through a guitar and a band and music. I will fix this. I will be the lightning rod that brings back revival into this space.
Yeah.
Who are you trying to glorify in that point? Like
Mm.
you're trying to glorify yourself. Like
Yeah.
that's what that's about. Like that you are necessary to do that. Forget all the churches that have been faithful in this space and in this place for not just years, but decades, even a century of
Yeah.
faithful
Mhm.
witness, of faithful work and faithful practice.
Yeah.
And saying like, nah, like I got this. I got this. This is on me.
Mhm.
Like, there's no humility in that.
Yeah.
And to your point, like there's no Jesus in that either.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think what's wild is how polarized this is for our churches.
Yeah.
Like this
Mm.
moment is a moment that's going to cause us all to be divided and fight. It's that part almost scary to me. And
Mhm.
how backlash of, and I love that we can protest in this country. I love that it kicks the dirt up. I love that 2020 is kicking the dirt up. I don't like the violence. I don't like the death. I don't like these things. But if I'm trying to find some of the silver lining in this moment, I love that you cannot lay idle this year. You
Mhm.
are being forced to pay attention to your blind spots or deny them. You have to wrestle with this year. You can't just go through your daily routine and not think about life. We have to actually think. And man, the church right now is so divided over this piece that we're willing to fully get behind, leaders in our nation who claim Christ but don't embody the very teachings that so many of our churches have, taught. And I'm not saying that either candidate is going to fully embody Scripture. What I do have a problem with is like this idea that declaring like Donald Trump or your candidate the Messiah of a nation, that's freaky to me. That doesn't sound like the kingdom Jesus came to establish at all. Now I'm rambling a little bit. Don't want to.
You know what? I think that's really interesting because I think 2020 is the year of wrestling with who Jesus is in a lot of respects, right? So like we talk about like you have to, as a follower of Christ, we have to see the world, like we look at the world and everything that we engage in through the lens of Christ, right? Like that is what it is. And yet, and that's what we have to teach people how to do is like, this is the lens of Jesus. This is how we interact with this thing, is how we see Jesus in this space. And in this midst, we've got multiple Jesuses running around. We've got multiple Jesus lenses. And the church has lost sight of who Jesus is. It's been covered up by Christian nationalism. Yeah. It's been covered up with violence, with greed, like you name it. And Jesus has been completely smudged. Yeah. And the idea is, well, how do we even recover that? How do we recover who this Jesus is in this space so that we can see the world through that lens? And I think we're in for a world of hurt as a result. So that's why we have the Seans running around doing this, and why the church is divided over whether or not, just because we have multiple Jesus lenses that we're looking through.
And I think I would throw this in. I don't know how accurate it is, just a theory of mine. I've spent a lot of time, even in Bible college and then in my own ministry experience, trying to combat the idea that ministry happens on Sunday. I've spent so much of my time doing that and hearing it being preached and never applied. And that's where the in our midst mentality was powerful for me, even as a youth minister, just working to help high schoolers understand that their locker is holy space, man. That just the hallway, whatever, just as practical and simple as that is. But I think I love that we can't gather on Sundays. I also don't have the pressure of being a mega church pastor and seeing like job loss and all these different things. So I don't want to just like bulldoze as if I'm right about that. Because I do have some sensitivity towards it, but I love the groan I see in the church right now, because we have justice issues in our nation, but we're upset we can't sing. Yeah. And I think that COVID has helped reveal that. Now, it's very apparent to me that people aren't maybe going to make the jump into seeing the opportunities that this year is providing. But in general, we have detached the church from the neighborhood. And in doing so, we commute to the presence of God, and we leave, and then we come back. And those, I think, who are thriving right now are at the sub-level of where the gospel has actually been rooting itself in. People have been saying the church is in decline in America, and that statistic is based on Sunday gathering attendance. Yeah. So, but what's ironic to me is we haven't been a church for the last year, or just more than actually 1 year, September of last year, that hasn't been like focused on the metrics surrounding a Sunday. We've been focused on all kinds of metrics. And I think what's been interesting about that experience is we don't measure success based on who shows up on a Sunday. We're measuring it based off stories from the neighborhood. And at the street level of the neighborhood, the gospel's everywhere. It's teeming, man. You get, my community group has like 10 people. Those 10 people practicing the way of Jesus in Portland, dude, the impact that's coming from their generosity, their love, their prayer for their neighbors, them showing up. No, we don't have 1,000 people showing up on a Sunday, but I've got 10 people who are doing insane amount of good with 10 of their neighbors. Yeah. And it's powerful. And I think it excites me for the neighborhood level of ministry. If we could come, like we could ground ourselves again. That we could be reminded that literally the neighbor across the street, that you don't know their name and you've lived next to them for 10 years, or you know their name but you have no clue what their struggle is, no clue what's going on. Like that's what quarantine does. It makes you stay in your neighborhood. It makes you pay attention to who's there and what's going on there. And I'm excited for this opportunity for the church to really latch in. But yeah, decontextualized response to the neighborhood is what we're seeing, and it's scary. It's dangerous. It's when we called the holy wars holy. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
We called them holy. Like we said, this is a pure, unblemished idea. This is as good as the Garden of Eden. Let's do it. That's crazy, but that's what happens when we stop spending time with people who look different than us, think different than us, invite them to our table, share a meal, be hospitable to them. Yeah, we can start to force our worldview.
And that's the work, right? Like that's the re-Jesusing of the church.
Right.
Is like living into those practices of sitting in those spaces and doing that work. That's what the church is missing. Like that's and that's not a bash on anything. It's just saying like that's what we need to recommit ourselves to. Then we'll find that lens.
Yeah,
we'll find that lens.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll clean it off just a little bit.
Yeah, and there was an image that came to mind, Sam, when you said like we commute into the church, right? Like you commute into it. There was an image that came to mind of like that's what Old Testament theology was you went to the temple, right? Like to experience the presence of God, you brought things to the temple and you had to go, and then when you left the presence of God. But what happened when Jesus died was the curtain was then torn and the Spirit then went everywhere. And like now the Spirit of God is everywhere. And so, we can go back to that where like we no longer are commuting to the church. We're no longer going to Sunday morning. We're experiencing, living, breathing, and embodying the Spirit of Jesus everywhere we are, everywhere we go. And then that's what worship looks like. And so, like if we can recapture that and like as pastors commit to teaching that, I think it's really easy for us to have these conversations and be like, yeah, why is no one thinking like this? Like, how did we get here? I think in part, like we have to take ownership that like, what have we done to perpetuate the problem or not speak up when like, because yes, theologically and intellectually, we're like, yeah, worship isn't music. This isn't worship. Like it's an embodiment of law. But like when we actually get down to it, what do we typically default to? We're like measuring Sunday mornings. We're trying to figure out ways to sing. Like we're defaulting to these things. So the idea that like you, haven't met on a Sunday. Did I hear you right? Haven't met on a Sunday since September? Is that what you're
No. We haven't met on a Sunday since the beginning of COVID. But our Sunday,
gotcha.
What we were doing on Sunday shifted. How we gathered,
gotcha,
and what we measured as success for the rhythm of our church wasn't any longer tied to Sunday. So
gotcha.
It became much more untraditional. It wasn't as traditional as like, hey, we have a 40-minute sermon and singing. It was a very different type of gathering, just potluck conversations. Every now and then we'd sing. But the shift was what is success in the church? What does it actually look like for the church to perish in a place? So yeah, that was the shift. I was also going to say, I think to what you just said, Trevor, in the teaching, something that I have gone back to is the time of exile, which so much of the Bible is written from the perspective of exile. But Jeremiah 29 has been probably the anchoring text for me since I've been in Portland, but also for our church, and then this year especially. But just that concept of seeking the welfare of the city. You have people rising up saying, "Hey, we're gonna get out of Babylon. We're gonna go back, and we're gonna get to go back to the temple and worship. We're gonna get to go back and practice that rhythm of being Jewish and being at the temple with the presence of God and offering sacrifices and all that there." That's what people were saying. We're gonna go back. We're gonna go back. And Jeremiah has the unfun message, the fun message of, "No, you're not going back. You're not going to go back to the temple." In fact, what God is asking of us is to dig in, plant gardens, to marry up our children, and seek the welfare of Babylon, which is why I get so pissed when I see Christians talking poorly of Portland, because we're supposed to be seeking its welfare. The gospel should be benefiting people who are faithful to Jesus and who are not. That there's so much more to our practice than just putting our hands in the air and singing songs. Like common grace, like actually seeking the equity of our neighbors, it's lost upon us. We don't know how to do it without giving money to a church so that the church leadership can go do it. We have neutered the congregation. And I think Jeremiah is getting at this, like, no, dig in, you're not coming home. Stay there. And you have to think of it from their perspective. Everything about them and how they identified religiously was stripped from them. Their names are stripped from them. And you see Daniel in all of the characters from the exile time trying to figure out, how do we sort through this cultural moment? Well, you can change my name, but I'm not changing my diet. So that for Daniel, that's where he took a stand. And I think we have to, in this time, in partnership with the Spirit, figure out where we take our stand and how we still seek the welfare of Seattle, of Portland, of my neighborhood, Buckman and Hosford Abernathy, if you want to get even down, or Sherman Street, the street I live on. So we're in an interesting time, but I think this time is calling for us to see it differently than let's go fight Babylon. God loves Babylon. How do we forget that? In fact, you guys are all in exile because you were trying to build your own, Israelite nation, and you had forgotten your first love. You had forgotten the things that made you distinct. Be a blessing to all nations that has been forgotten. So it's the plan's falling apart now. You're in exile, and while you're in exile, I just want you to remember that those who have taken you into captivity, I love too. Woo! Meaty and heavy, but definitely powerful, I think, for this cultural moment. And I think I can feel I'm not an exile, like you guys said. I'm like a white, affluent pastor. I think I'm a someone else can decide. And bearded, but I feel like I can peer into those texts in a fresh new way this year, because we've had certain things stripped away that we affiliated with religiously, and now we're being asked to continue to incarnate the gospel where we're at. Not to say Portland's going to hell. No one in Portland, that does not help anyone's cause when it comes to bearing witness to grace. No, there are beautiful people in Portland. Portland in a lot of ways looks like the kingdom. In a lot of ways it doesn't. In a lot of ways it does. So rant over.
You know what? I would add to that, and some of that is because we're like, as a church, we're beginning a walk through the book of Acts, and Acts 1 is a really fascinating tie-in to Jeremiah 29, just in the idea of all of a sudden, like, here's the ascension. Jesus is about to leave Earth, and the very first question the disciples ask, right, of him before he leaves is now the moment that you're gonna return Israel back, like restore the kingdom? Like, is this the moment that you're going to make Israel great again? Like, I think that's they want to get back to that temple theology still, right? Like, they're like, hey, let's do that thing. And Jesus is like, you missed the point. You missed the point. Because now's the moment. Like, you're going to sit here and wait for a little while because you need some help. The Holy Spirit is going to come because you need some help. Yeah. But you are going to not do that. You're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the end of the earth. This is a sending mission. Like, the church is a sending thing. Yeah. And in the midst of that, right at the end of that, they gather together for prayer, and there's only 120 of them. Yeah. Right? 120. So, like, you want to talk about church plant fail. Jesus. Like, every book out there about what a successful church plant is 200 or 300 plus. Yeah. Ooh, sorry, Jesus, you blew it. And it was only 120 people, right? Like, you failed. So,
yeah, he had to get out of here.
He had to get out of here because he blew it, right? But here's the thing. It's not that he gathered 120 people. Like, he gathered 120 people that were set on mission, that he had discipled, that he had spent so much time investing his life in them, that all of a sudden they were now going to scatter. And in that scattering, a movement started. Right. Like, it's not about gathering a church of 3,000. It's not about gathering a church of 200. It's not about a church of 300. Yeah. It's about gathering. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. Like, what are you doing in that space? So, like, the work that you're doing with the people in your community, no, we've eschewed those metrics.
Mhm.
And now what we're doing is we're taking this all about the quality of people,
Right.
how we can invest in them, show them who Jesus is, like re-Jesus people like crazy, so that they look at the world through that Jesus lens.
Yeah.
And we just set them loose. Like, oh my goodness, that is what is necessary, not the Sean's.
Yeah.
Rant over.
Yeah. I would love to see Sean be willing to have civil conversation with a pastor that thinks differently. That's the other problem with the media moment is you continue to declare that you're right. Dude, my mom would never have allowed me to always be right. Are you kidding me? We don't raise anyone. So I don't know what happens in some Christian circles where all of a sudden you can just go and just declare it and impose it. It's like, and not even engage the conversation that's clearly happening. Like the pushback you're getting pushback. Like, don't just dismiss it and call it, I'm being persecuted. Tell that to your friends in China. Like, are you kidding me? No, you're not being persecuted at all. You have access to great cheeseburgers. Like, yeah. Anyways,
I want to meet your mom, because you said wouldn't allow me to always be right. I'm like, my mom wouldn't let me be right at all.
no, that's what I'm saying.
What is this always?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
right
yeah.
all the time, except for
Yeah,
that
it's
one
true.
time. No.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I'll send this to my mom. You're the boss. Right? You're the boss. Aaron, these guys are keeping me in check, Mom. She'll love this. You know, moms love that when they get the shout out.
So true.
My mom loves it. And like, in a sermon, if I tell a story and she's mentioned, she's like, it's my boy, and I'm full.
My mom just shakes her head. Is like,
Don't talk about me.
don't tell that story. Don't tell that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Thank you, Sam, for your time and your conversation. It was great. Much appreciated for you being with us today. We will be posting these. I'm saying this so that I actually do it. We will be posting the audio of this live stream on our Awake My Soul podcast. So if you go to awakemysoulpodcast.com, you can access a whole bunch of other things like Lectio Divina and guided prayers that we're doing, but we'll also be posting these audio versions. So if you are not able to watch, you can also listen and put it on the side. So thank you, everyone, for watching that has watched, and thank you, Sam, for being with us here today.
Yeah, dude, it was fun. Thanks for the invite. The conversation is good. We need to be doing more of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks,
for
Sam.
sure. For sure.